Chosen one. There is a specific kind of tired. Not the tired that comes from working too hard, not the tired that comes from sleeping too little, but the tired that settles into your bones when you have given too much of yourself to someone who was never going to notice. You know this tired. You have felt it at the end of days that should have been ordinary. You have carried it home through traffic. You have nursed it in the long silence before sleep. A quiet, persistent weight, not quite pain, more like the feeling of reaching for something and never quite reaching it. The feeling of pouring and watching the vessel stay empty. You remember the beginning. You remember how electric it felt, how completely seen you felt in those first weeks, how certain you were that something rare had found you. You remember the way they studied you, the careful questions, the way they seemed to understand everything you said before you even finished saying it. You thought that was intimacy. You were not wrong to think so. You were wrong to think it would last, because what you were experiencing was not love. It was inventory. They were cataloguing your needs, your fears, your softest places, and your oldest wounds. Not to protect them, but to know exactly where to press when they needed you to comply or stay. They needed you to doubt yourself enough to stop asking questions. Let me give you a scene. You are sitting at a table surrounded by people. The food is good, the laughter is easy, and they are performing beautifully, charming, warm, and magnetic. They are the kind of person everyone leans toward when they speak. And you watch it all with a strange, private double vision. You see what everyone else sees. This brilliant, generous, wonderful person. Yet you also see what they do not. You see the version that waited until the car door closed. You see the version that counted every look you gave to someone else at the table. The version that spent the drive home cataloguing your failures. You always make yourself the center of attention. I saw how you were looking at him. I did not want to say anything in front of everyone, but there is something you need to hear. And you sat there, in the dark of the car, feeling something fold quietly inside you. Some small version of yourself contracting, trying to take up less space, to breathe less loudly, to exist a little more carefully. This is rarely a dramatic story, chosen one. It rarely is. The damage caused by narcissistic abuse is almost never dramatic. It is structural. It happens in the everyday, in the small, repeated moments that no one sees but you. The withholding of warmth that lasts just a little too long. The look that makes you feel like a burden. The silence that teaches your body to brace before they open their mouth. Until one day you realize you are reading their moods the way you check the sky for rain, automatically. Before you can afford to make any move at all, you stop speaking freely. You start calculating. You edit yourself before the words even leave your mouth. You watch their face when you laugh too loudly. You apologize before they finish their sentence. Not because you are weak, because survival inside their world requires exactly this kind of vigilance. It is the body-breaking, soul-depleting vigilance of someone who is never allowed to rest. Chosen one. C.S. Lewis wrote something in Mere Christianity that I want you to hear slowly. He was not writing about petty vanity. He was writing about pride in its deepest, most ancient, most spiritually devastating form. He called it the anti-God state, the complete spiritual disease. Lewis wrote, "Pride is essentially competitive. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person." Now let that sentence sit inside the context of what you experienced. A narcissist does not want love. They want to win. They do not want a partner beside them. They want a mirror beneath them rather than a partner beside them. A mirror that reflects their superiority back constantly, uninterrupted, unquestioned. And when the mirror shows them something they dislike, they do not look inward, they punish the mirror. Every relationship to them is a competition they must control, a hierarchy where they must always hold the dominant position, and you, chosen one, were the most valuable resource they had ever encountered. Not because you were easy to manipulate, because you were full. You had what they could never generate inside themselves: genuine feeling, real empathy, the capacity for love that actually costs something. They sensed it the moment they met you. Like finding fresh water in a season of drought. They were not in love with you. They were thirsty for what you carried. And here is what no one tells you clearly enough. You were not chosen because you were broken. You were chosen because you were rich. Rich in what the anti-God state can never produce from within itself. The willingness to feel deeply. The ability to give without keeping score. The dangerous generosity of a person who still believes in people. And all of that, every beautiful thing about you, was turned against you. They pressed on your compassion to excuse their cruelty. They pressed on your loyalty to prevent you from leaving. They pressed on your hope to keep you waiting for the version of them that was always almost arriving. Chosen one. There is only one kind of person who can truly survive this. Not just leave, not just escape the address, but survive completely. Come out the other side with their identity still intact, still capable of trusting their own instincts, still able to open their hands toward another person, still able to love. That kind of survival requires something specific, something that cannot be built in a crisis, something that was placed inside you long before you ever met them. God built you for this, not for the suffering, not for the slow erasure, but for what comes after the erasure, for the emergence, for the discovery that the self they worked so hard to diminish was never the real self anyway. The real self was underneath, deeper than they could reach, rooted in something they did not have access to, something they could sense but could never take. If you are listening to this right now, and you feel the recognition of what I am describing, if something in you said quietly, that is exactly what it was, go to the comments right now. Write these words: I know. Let this be your first acknowledgement, not of defeat, not of damage, but of clarity. It marks the moment you stop questioning your own perception and begin trusting what you already knew. Write it now, because we are only beginning to uncover what God placed inside you and why it made you the kind of person who could survive this. Stay with me, chosen one. The most dangerous weapon the narcissistic person used against you was not their anger. It was not their silence. It was not their cruelty. The most dangerous weapon they used against you was you. Your empathy, your willingness to understand, your instinct to look for the wound behind the behavior, your habit of offering grace before you had been asked for it. These were the weapons, and they never had to steal them from you. You handed them over freely, because that is what people like you do. You lead with trust. You assume the best. You believe that if you love someone well enough, consistently enough, patiently enough, they will eventually find their way back to wholeness. That is a beautiful belief. It is also what makes you a perfect target. Let me tell you what happens in the early stages. There is a phase at the beginning that feels like being recognized by God. They see you completely. They remember every detail. The small thing you mentioned once about your childhood. The name of the person who hurt you in your 20s. The dream you stopped saying out loud because people never seem to take it seriously. They hold all of it. They reference it. They make you feel like the most important person in any room they have ever entered. This is called love bombing. And it is not love. It is reconnaissance dressed as devotion. They are learning your architecture. Every entrance, every window, every unguarded corner. Not to inhabit you, to own you. Then, when they have mapped everything, the warmth begins to shift. Slowly at first, so slowly you question your own memory. The attention that was constant becomes conditional. The warmth that felt effortless now requires something from you, a performance, a behavior, a loyalty tax that gets quietly raised without anyone announcing the change. And you adjust, because you are good at adjusting. You are good at reading rooms, good at sensing what is needed and bending yourself to provide it. You tell yourself, this is just a difficult season. Everyone has rough patches. I just need to be more patient. And so you pour more in. You give more grace. You hold more space. You make yourself smaller to give them more room. And this is the trap, chosen one. Not the cruelty, the willingness to interpret the cruelty as something you caused. That is where the trap closes around you. The moment you start believing that your love, applied in the right way and at the right intensity, will fix what is broken in them, that is the moment the weapon is fully loaded. Let me give you a scene. You have done something ordinary. You came home 30 minutes late. You forgot something they mentioned last week. You laughed at a joke they didn't find funny. And suddenly, the temperature in the room drops. No explanation, no conversation, just the withdrawal, the careful avoidance of your eyes, the single word answers. The way they move through the space, as if you are furniture, they have temporarily decided not to acknowledge. You know this feeling. The low-level panic that sets in, the mental replay of the last 24 hours, searching for the offense, the careful, gentle approach, are you okay? And the reply that is designed to cost you something, I'm fine. Two words that are never fine. Two words that say, figure it out. Come to me. Demonstrate that I matter enough for you to chase me. And you chase, because inside your chest lives a person who cannot bear to be the reason someone is suffering, who cannot rest while there is distance between you and someone you love. That instinct, that beautiful, generous, impossible to manufacture instinct, was what they found when they found you. Chosen one. C.S. Lewis made a distinction in the four loves that I want to lay out carefully. He wrote about two kinds of love, gift love and need love. Gift love, Lewis said, moves outward. It is the love that gives without requiring return. The love that finds fulfillment in the flourishing of the other. The love that does not keep accounts. Need love, by contrast, is the love that reaches toward what it lacks. Lewis was careful to say that need love is not evil in itself. Even our love toward God begins as need love. But here is the critical distinction. A healthy person moves from need love toward gift love as they grow, they receive, and eventually they give. A narcissist never makes this journey. They are permanently, structurally locked in need love. Their entire relational life is organized around one question: what can this person provide for me? And they have no mechanism for genuine gift love, because gift love requires a self that is secure enough to lose something, and the narcissist has no secure self, only the performance of one, so they come to you. And you, who are built for gift love, who reach naturally toward the flourishing of others, become the endless resource for someone who will drain you without ever noticing the cost. This is not your failure. This is the architecture of predation. Listen to what Jesus said to his disciples in Matthew chapter 10, verse 16. Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Notice that Jesus did not tell them to stop being doves. He did not say, become a wolf to survive the wolves. He said, carry the innocence, but add to it the wisdom, because the dove without wisdom is simply prey with beautiful feathers. God is not asking you to stop being empathetic. He is asking you to become a version of yourself that your empathy cannot be turned against. That is the specific work he has been doing in you, through every painful lesson, through every moment you trusted the wrong person and paid the price, through every cycle you recognized too late. He has been building in you something that the narcissist never anticipated: discernment, the ability to feel deeply and still see clearly, the capacity to love without surrendering your perception. Chosen one, if you are sitting with the weight of understanding what was actually being done to you, if the inventory, the love bombing, the devaluation, the silent treatment as punishment, if all of it is clicking into place right now in a way that is both clarifying and painful, go to the comments right now. Write these words: I understand now. Let this be your second declaration. Not shame for not seeing it sooner, not anger at yourself for staying too long, but the clear, honest acknowledgement. Now I see what it was. Now I understand the mechanism. Now I know what they were doing with what I gave them. Write it now, because understanding the weapon is the first step to removing it from their hands. Stay with me, chosen one. Here is the paradox you need to hold very carefully. The thing that made you a target is the same thing that makes you a survivor. These are not two separate qualities. They are two sides of the same depth. The capacity that the narcissist exploited. Your empathy, your sensitivity, your instinct to feel things completely instead of skimming across the surface of life. This is the same capacity that will carry you to the other side of this, intact. When the person who has no depth encounters the person who has great depth, one of two things happens. Either the shallow person drowns in the encounter, or they recognize the depth and decide to feed from it. The narcissist chose to feed, but the depth remains. It cannot be consumed. It can only be depleted temporarily. But temporary depletion is not permanent destruction. Let me show you something from C.S. Lewis that will reframe everything you thought you understood about why they came to you. In the Screwtape Letters, Lewis writes from the perspective of a senior demon advising his nephew on how to corrupt a human soul. And what strikes you, if you read carefully, is this: the demons do not target weakness first, they target strength. Screwtape writes about the danger of allowing the patient to experience genuine love, genuine joy, genuine connection. Because these things, he explains, create a gravitational pull toward God. And so the strategy is not to attack the vices. The strategy is to corrupt the virtues, to take the compassion and twist it into codependency, to take the loyalty and transform it into a trap, to take the capacity for hope and turn it into the mechanism that keeps the person returning to the same wound again and again. Do you see what this means? The narcissistic person in your life was not the only force working against you. They were an instrument, a vessel for something older and more strategic than their own hunger. Your depth was targeted precisely because your depth was your connection to the divine, the empathy, the capacity to love without keeping score, the willingness to believe in people past the point where it was rational to believe. These are not human accidents. These are spiritual endowments. And spiritual endowments, when they are operating in full, create a kind of light that darkness is drawn to and disturbed by. You were not chosen at random. You were chosen because you carry something that the broken system of the narcissistic world cannot generate and cannot tolerate. Now listen carefully, because this is where the story changes. The Screwtape Letters show us something else. In Lewis's vision, the demons can corrupt virtue temporarily. They can redirect it. They can weaponize it against its owner. But they cannot destroy it completely, because the virtue was not yours to begin with. It was placed in you by something outside their jurisdiction. And what is placed by God cannot be permanently dismantled by darkness. It can be buried. It can be silenced. It can be turned in on itself until it becomes unrecognizable. But it does not disappear. It waits. And the moment the pressure is removed, it begins to return to its original shape, like a branch that has been held under water. The moment the hand releases, it rises. This is what God knew when He designed you. He did not design you to be invulnerable. He designed you to be indestructible. These are different things. Invulnerable means nothing gets through. Indestructible means everything that gets through cannot ultimately break you. Let me give you a scene. You are standing in a room. Maybe it is your kitchen. Maybe it is your car in the parking lot of a grocery store. Maybe it is a bathroom with the door locked, and something has just happened. An argument, a revelation, a moment of clarity that cost you something. And you are shaking, physically. Your hands are not steady. Your breathing is not even. And you are saying to yourself something like, I cannot do this anymore. But notice something. You said, I cannot. Not, I have not survived. Not, I am broken beyond repair. You said, I cannot. Which means the thing asking that question is still functional, still present, still taking inventory, still fighting for something. That is the design, chosen one. That trembling, exhausted thing in the bathroom with the locked door. That is the survivor, not the triumphant version, not the healed, rested, clear-eyed version, the raw one, the one that is still standing even when standing hurts. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says this, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Notice what this verse does not say. It does not say, close your heart. It does not say, arm your heart. It does not say, harden your heart. Guard it. Guard implies that what is inside is worth protecting. Guard implies that the territory has value. Guard implies that the heart is still open, just protected. This is the instruction God gave to a people who were designed for love, but living in a world where love could be weaponized. He did not tell them to become something different. He told them to protect what they already were. You were not designed to become someone who cannot feel. You were designed to become someone whose feeling is no longer available to anyone who has not earned the access. There is a difference between a heart that is closed and a heart that is guarded. A closed heart cannot be hurt, but it also cannot be filled. A guarded heart can still receive everything that love was meant to deliver. It has simply learned to require credentials before it opens the gate. This is wisdom. This is the serpent-dove combination Jesus spoke about. This is the Matthew 10:16 life that God has been trying to build in you through the very experience that was meant to destroy you. The narcissist came to take your depth. They could not take it. They could only reveal it. Because when you press on something indestructible, what you discover is not damage. What you discover is the shape of the thing that cannot break. Chosen one. If you are beginning to feel something shift, if the weight of understanding is turning into something different, something that feels like ground beneath your feet after a long time of falling, go to the comments right now. Write these words. I was designed for this. Not for the pain, for the survival, for the emergence, for the proof that what God put in you was always stronger than what they tried to remove. Write it now, because the design is still intact, even when it doesn't feel like it, especially when it doesn't feel like it. Stay with me, chosen one. There is something no one talks about clearly enough. Not the cruelty, not the manipulation, not even the leaving. What no one talks about clearly enough is the cost of staying, not the dramatic cost, not the obvious cost of being hurt, but the slow, invisible cost of living inside a world that is organized around someone else's version of you. Let me describe it to you. At some point in the relationship, you stopped having opinions, not because you lost them, but because having an opinion had become too expensive. Every opinion you expressed had the potential to become an argument. Every preference you stated could be used as evidence of your selfishness. Every time you said, "I feel," it became an invitation for them to explain why your feeling was incorrect. And so, over time, you learned a different language, the language of deflection. Whatever you prefer. I don't mind either way. You know better than I do. These were not phrases of generosity. They were phrases of survival. The internal logic was simple. If I have no opinion, there is nothing to attack. If I disappear into your preferences, I become safe. And somewhere in that process, in that long, patient, exhausting process of making yourself smaller and smaller, you lost the thread that connected you to yourself, to the version of you that existed before them, the one who knew what they liked, who had instincts they trusted, who could make a decision in a restaurant without a rehearsal, who laughed without checking if it was the right time to laugh. Let me give you a scene. You are looking at a photograph. It is from before, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 7, and you are looking at the person in that photograph. The posture is different. The eyes are different. There is something in that face that is difficult to name. Some kind of ease, some kind of presence. A person who takes up exactly the space they are entitled to. No more, no less. And you look at that person and you feel something complicated. Not nostalgia exactly, more like grief. A quiet grief for a version of yourself that you did not have the words to protect when it was being quietly taken from you. This is the most honest description of what prolonged narcissistic abuse can do. It does not break you in one moment. It performs a slow subtraction, taking things so gradually that you do not notice the absence until the absence is enormous. Your friendships, one by one, they faded. Not because your friends abandoned you, but because the energy required to maintain them was being consumed entirely by the management of one relationship, your creativity, the things you used to make, build, write, sing, imagine, quietly set aside, because every act of self-expression was a potential source of conflict. Your body, the tension you carried in your shoulders, the stomach that was never fully settled, the sleep that never felt complete because even in rest, some part of you was monitoring, bracing, preparing. This is not weakness. This is the documented physiological response of a nervous system that has been living on permanent alert. When the threat level never fully drops, the body does not fully rest, and the mind pays the same tax. You found yourself apologizing for things you did not do, taking responsibility for moods that were not caused by you, running through mental checklists of what might go wrong today, reading rooms, reading silences, reading the angle of a text message to determine what level of danger you were in. Chosen one. C.S. Lewis described this kind of diminishment in The Great Divorce with devastating precision. He wrote about souls who arrive at the edge of heaven, transparent, diminished, like people who have spent so long folding themselves into smaller and smaller shapes that they have almost ceased to exist. These souls are offered something extraordinary, an invitation to become more solid, more real, more present, to step into the light and let it fill the places that the long diminishment had emptied. But many of them refuse, not out of malice, out of habit. The habit of smallness had become their identity. They no longer knew how to be large. The idea of taking up space again, of having preferences, of making noise, felt dangerous, felt wrong, felt like exactly the thing that had always gotten them into trouble. And so they chose to remain as they were, thin, fading, comfortable in the diminished version, because the diminished version, at least, was familiar. Chosen one. Do not choose the familiar diminishment. You have been small for long enough. Lamentations chapter 3, verses 55 through 57 says, I called on your name, O Lord, from the lowest pit. You have heard my voice. Do not hide your ear from my sighing, from my cry for help. You drew near on the day I called on you and said, do not fear, from the lowest pit. This is important. Not from a position of strength, not from a place of clarity. From the lowest pit. From the place where the diminishment had reduced everything to almost nothing. From the place where the voice was barely more than a breath. And God heard. Not because the prayer was eloquent, not because the person had recovered enough to pray properly, but because the voice was still there, however faint, however broken, however buried under years of learned smallness. The voice was still there, and the voice is still in you. I know you cannot always hear it. I know there are days when the person in the photograph feels like a stranger, when the thread back to yourself feels impossibly thin. But here is what I need you to know. The thread was never cut, only wound around and around until finding the end takes patience. And patience, after everything you have survived, is something you have in abundance. Chosen one. Guarding your heart does not mean closing it. It means refusing to keep it open to the one who was using its openness against you. That is the act of love toward yourself that God is calling you into right now. Not the dramatic act, not the theatrical one, the daily, quiet, consistent act of choosing your own perception over their narrative, of saying, my voice matters, my instincts are real, my presence takes up exactly the space it is supposed to take up. Go to the comments right now, write these words, I guard my heart. Let this be your fourth declaration. Not a closing, a protection. The act of standing between yourself and the mechanism that was consuming you. Write it now, because the thread is still there, and you're about to find the end of it. Stay with me. Chosen one. There is something profound about the way God moves when He has decided it is time. He does not always announce it. He does not always send a warning. He does not always make it feel like rescue in the moment it is happening. Sometimes the extraction feels like collapse. Sometimes the thing God is removing from your life looks from the inside like destruction. And you cry for what is being taken away. You grieve it. You try to hold it together. You reach back toward the very thing that was slowly making you disappear. Because the familiar hurt is somehow less terrifying than the unfamiliar freedom. Let me give you a scene. It is your first night alone. Maybe they left. Maybe you finally left. Maybe the thing ended in a way you still do not fully have words for. But you are in a room, and the room is quiet in a way that feels enormous. Not peaceful, not yet, just vast. Like standing at the edge of an open field after years in a narrow corridor. Your body does not know what to do with this much space. Your nervous system is still monitoring, still waiting for the next correction, still bracing for the look, the silence, the shift in temperature that signals danger. But it does not come, and the absence of it is stranger than anything you expected, because you prepared for the pain of losing them. You did not prepare for the confusion of not knowing who you are without the structure they imposed on you, without their version of you to react against. You do not know what you like for dinner when no one is going to critique the choice. You do not know how long to stay in the shower when no one is counting the minutes. You do not know how to sit in silence when silence is no longer a punishment. This is the most disorienting part of the extraction, not the grief, the freedom that you have forgotten how to inhabit. Chosen one. C.S. Lewis described a moment in Surprised by Joy that I want to place carefully beside what you are experiencing. Writing about his conversion, Lewis was honest that surrender did not initially feel welcome. He portrayed himself as being drawn reluctantly into a kingdom he had resisted. Opening his hands, meant releasing the smaller story he had tried to preserve. He resisted, argued, and tried to maintain the architecture of his previous life. But something larger than his resistance was already in motion. And what felt like surrender was actually liberation. What felt like loss was actually the opening of a much larger room. God does not always extract us gently. Sometimes the extraction requires force, not because God is cruel, but because the thing we are attached to has us attached to it as well. And detaching takes the kind of decisive action that God is not afraid to take on our behalf when we have been unable to take it ourselves. The narcissistic relationship did not end by accident, whatever form the ending took, and whatever sequence of events led to the separation. God's hand was in the architecture of that ending, not to punish you, but to free you. And the proof is in what came after. However slowly, however confusingly, something began to return, not all at once, but in small, unexpected moments. The first time you laughed without checking if it was allowed, the first time you made a decision and felt nothing but the quiet satisfaction of having made it. The first time you woke up and the first thought in your mind was not about managing their mood. The first morning where the silence was not a threat. These are the fingerprints of the extraction. The small, quiet, steady evidence that what God removed was the obstruction, and what is emerging is the original. Psalm 18, verse 19. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. Spacious. Not cramped, not narrow, not the corridor where you had learned to move sideways just to get through. Spacious. The word implies room to breathe, room to become, room to take up exactly the space you were designed to inhabit. And the reason? Not because you earned it, not because you performed correctly, but because he delighted in you. The God of the universe, the one who holds every star in its place, looked at you in your diminished state, in your confused, grieving, disoriented state, and found delight, not because of what you had achieved, but because of who you were. In the original design that had survived every attempt to erase it, in the depth that had endured every attempt to drain it. This is the God who removed that destructive relationship from your orbit, not reluctantly, with intention, with purpose, with a specific plan for what the spacious place was going to allow you to become. Chosen one. You may still be in the middle of the grief. You may still be in that first room, the vast, quiet, disorienting room where freedom feels more like emptiness than like liberation. That is a real experience. The grief of losing someone who was hurting you is one of the strangest griefs there is, because you grieve not only the person, you grieve the version of yourself that believed the story they were telling. You grieve the years, the investment, the hope that kept renewing itself past every reason it should have stopped. That grief is real, and it is allowed. But hear me carefully. The grief is not proof that leaving was wrong. The grief is proof that you were fully present, that you gave something real, that you loved with an actual heart. And a person who can love like that, fully, expensively, without guarantee of return, is exactly the person God is preparing for something the narrow corridor never had room for. Go to the comments right now. Write these words. God brought me out. Let this be your fifth declaration. Not a celebration of the pain being over, but an acknowledgement of the hand that was moving in the architecture of your ending, the hand that opened the corridor and replaced it with something vast. Write it now, because the spacious place is not empty. It is waiting to be filled with the version of you that the narrow corridor never had room for. Stay with me. Chosen one. We have come a long way together. We started in the exhaustion, in the specific bone-deep tired of someone who has been giving themselves to a person who was never going to notice. We trace the mechanism of the weapon, how your empathy, the most genuine thing about you, was turned into the instrument of your diminishment. We looked at the design. The reason your depth was targeted was because your depth was your connection to something untouchable. We sat with the cost, the slow subtraction of opinion, voice, friendship, and finally, the ability to recognize your own face. We witnessed the extraction, the disorienting, grief-soaked, confusing freedom of a spacious place you did not know how to inhabit at first. And now we arrive at the final truth, the one that is harder to receive than all the others. Not because it is painful, because it is almost impossibly good. Chosen one, you are not who you were before. Let me say that again slowly. You are not who you were before. And I do not mean that as loss. I mean it as the most important upgrade you have undergone in this lifetime. The person who existed before that relationship, that person was full. That person was genuinely capable of love. That person had depth that most people around them could barely comprehend. But that person did not know the limits of their own indestructibility. They had never been tested at the level required to discover what they were actually made of. The narcissistic relationship became the test, though not intentionally or generously, yet the result remains. You now know something about yourself that no accomplishment, no relationship, no season of ease could have ever revealed. You know what remains when everything that can be taken is taken, and what remains is significant. C.S. Lewis wrote something in The Weight of Glory that I want to place in your hands very carefully. He wrote, "It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses. To remember that the dullest, most uninteresting person you talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship." He was writing about the hidden glory that exists in every human soul, the weight of what we are and what we are being shaped toward. And he said this, "There are no ordinary people. You've never talked to a mere mortal." Now hear this. The narcissistic person looked at you and saw a resource, a supply, something to be drawn from and discarded. They looked at you and saw the least possible version of you, because the smallest possible version of you was the most useful to them. But God looks at you and sees the full trajectory, not just who you are today, but who you are being shaped into, the complete arc, the version of you that survived the erosion and came out understanding something most people will never be pressed into. That version of you is not small. That version of you carries something that the narcissist spent years trying to diminish and simply could not. Isaiah chapter 54, verse 17 says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is from me, says the Lord." No weapon, not some weapons or most weapons, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And that word formed is important. It does not say no weapon will be aimed at you. It does not promise you will never be targeted. It says the weapon will not prosper. It will not accomplish what it was designed to accomplish. The weapon used against you was designed to reduce you, make you smaller than your design, and convince you that this smallness was the truth. It did not prosper. You are here, still feeling, still reaching, still capable of love, still capable of this conversation. The weapon failed. Let me pray for you. Father, right now, there is a person listening to these words. They have survived something that was designed to end them, not their physical life, but their identity and sense of self. their ability to trust their own instincts, their capacity to believe that what they feel is real, and they are still here, still searching, still willing to listen for the sound of a voice that tells them the truth. I am asking you, Father, to do what you have always done with the people you love most. Make them new, not by erasing what happened, but by redeeming it, by taking every season of diminishment and turning it into the material out of which something larger is built. Let them feel the weight of who they actually are, not the version the narcissistic person needed them to be, not the version shaped by years of calculated reduction, but the original, the one you knew before a single word of their story was written, the one you have been protecting at a level deeper than the narcissist could reach. Give them back their voice, their instincts, their laughter that does not calculate permission, their love that does not brace for punishment, their presence that takes up exactly the space it was always supposed to take up. Let them stand in the spacious place and finally, fully breathe. In Jesus' name, Amen. Chosen one. You are not a casualty of what you survived. You are the proof that it could not finish you. You are the evidence that what God places in a person is deeper than what darkness can reach. You are the kind of person who can survive narcissistic abuse, not because you are perfect, not because you are strong in the way the world defines strength, but because you were built with something underneath the empathy, underneath the love, underneath the capacity for feeling, something irreducible, something that the longest erosion, the most sophisticated manipulation, the most patient campaign of diminishment could not locate and could not remove. God made you that person, before the relationship, before the loss, before the confusion of the first night alone. He made you the only kind of person who could walk through all of that and still come out with something essential intact. Go to the comments one final time. Write these words: I receive my identity. Let this be your sixth and final declaration. Not who they said you were, not the version that survived by making itself small, but the full version, the original, the one God knew, the one the narcissist could never actually touch. Write it now, and go stand in the spacious place. It was always waiting for you.